The universe had long since accepted a single, merciless truth. The Vratha Dominion never lost. For thousands of cycles, their fleets swept through star systems like tidal waves of living metal, extinguishing resistance with the cold efficiency of a machine that had forgotten the meaning of failure. Empires collapsed in their shadow. Civilizations bent their knees before their thunder. And across the spiral arms of countless galaxies, entire species whispered of them in trembling reverence, reciting the same chilling mantra. No one survived the Dominion's gaze. Yet in all their conquests, in all the solar systems reduced to ash, the Vratha had never encountered a world like the small blue orb hanging quietly within an unremarkable corner of a minor galaxy. A world that seemed to their strategists trivial, soft, primitive, barely worth the thrust of fuel required to descend upon it. The Dominion expected another swift victory, another extinguished flame. They expected obedience. They expected surrender. What they found instead was the first ember of something they had never faced before: fear. Humanity had always been underestimated. To the Dominion's intelligence cores, humans appeared startlingly fragile, carbon-based organisms whose bodies shattered easily under pressure and whose lifespans passed like the flicker of a candle. Their home world was considered backward, its governments fractured, its cultures chaotic, its nations locked in constant friction with one another. They possessed no interstellar empire, no unified species-wide command, no history of surviving galactic warfare. But the Dominion misread what lay beneath the surface. For humans were not defined by their instability, but by something deeper, something the Vratha would come to know far too late. Humans were defined by the relentless instinct to endure, to adapt, to rise again and again, even when logic argued that they should fall. The Dominion's invasion began the way all their campaigns did, with cold certainty. Their arrival carved burning scars across Earth's skies as massive carriers blotted out the sun. Atmospheric tremors pulsed across continents as gravity drives distorted the air, sending shockwaves rattling through cities. Across the United States, where the invasion wave first made landfall, millions watched the heavens ripple open like wounds exposing something monstrous beneath. Helicopters quivered on their landing pads. Highways vibrated as distant booms echoed across the horizon. Emergency networks lit up with frantic signals that crackled against the static of a world holding its breath. The Vratha believed they would break humanity quickly. Their tactics were designed not simply to conquer, but to overwhelm the mind, to instill paralysis before conflict even began. Civilization after civilization had collapsed under such psychological weight. Humans, however, responded differently. Where others froze, humans leaned forward. Where others panicked, humans gritted their teeth. Where others begged for mercy, humans clenched fists and scanned the darkening skies as though meeting the eyes of a long-awaited rival. The Dominion's first shock came not from Earth's armies nor its governments, but from the way humanity reacted at a fundamental, instinctive level. They watched as people across the United States, suburbs, cities, remote farms, coastal towns, began acting with a unified resolve no intelligence core had predicted. Neighbors reinforced each other's homes. Former soldiers guided civilians into defensive positions. Scientists remotely linked international communication lines to offer strategies that bypassed conventional military doctrine entirely. Ordinary people transformed into a decentralized, self-directed network of resilience and ingenuity. The Dominion had seen species fight back before, but never with such synchronized improvisation, never with such refusal to submit. Across military installations from Colorado to Virginia, analysts absorbed alien signals, dissected them, and began building countermeasures almost instantly. Air Force crews, once trained for atmospheric combat, adapted their aircraft to chase targets far beyond their original design tolerances. Naval strategists, used to oceans as their battlefield, suddenly found themselves orchestrating offensive maneuvers against orbital platforms. Every sector of American society shifted into motion, not because a single leader demanded it, but because a deeply human instinct awakened across the nation, to protect what was theirs, no matter the cost. But it wasn't just resilience that startled the Dominion. It was the ferocity of it. In previous conquests, resistance waned after first contact, but humanity hardened. Every loss only sharpened their strategy. Every destroyed city became a tactical lesson. Each wave of alien assault was met with an evolved variation of defense, as though the species had the unnerving ability to accelerate its own learning curve under pressure. What the Dominion did not understand, what they could never have predicted, was humanity's history. A history shaped not by cosmic warfare, but by conflict woven into the very fabric of their development. From their earliest ancestors to their most modern societies, humans had been forged in the crucible of struggle. They had survived extinction-level events, rival empires, internal schisms, natural disasters, and the constant grinding pressure of a world that demanded adaptation for every breath taken. When war came from the sky, humanity did not face an unfamiliar trial. They faced an echo of every challenge that had carved them into what they were, a species built not merely to live, but to overcome. The Dominion's second shock emerged from the planet itself. Earth was not the passive, resource-rich husk they expected. It was a volatile, unpredictable environment whose complexity defied their models. Weather patterns shifted abruptly, disrupting Vratha flight formations. Magnetic variations interfered with their scanning equipment. Terrain that appeared soft from orbit revealed itself to be treacherous. Dense forests, winding mountain ranges, vast plains, and urban landscapes designed with such diversity that no single strategy could be universally applied. And within this unpredictable world lived creatures, even more unpredictable. Human soldiers displayed a battlefield adaptability that bordered on the irrational, abandoning positions at the exact second before orbital strikes, appearing in locations the Dominion deemed inaccessible, wielding improvised technology that should not have worked, and yet somehow did. In a desert canyon, a squad used geological resonance to distort alien sensor readings. In a snow-covered valley, engineers repurposed civilian machines into weapons that destabilized Dominion walkers. Along the Appalachian Corridor, entire communities transformed familiar terrain into labyrinths of resistance, where Vratha forces became disoriented, trapped, and ultimately dismantled. The Dominion began to realize that they were not fighting a species, they were fighting a planet united with its inhabitants. A symbiosis of environmental advantage, historical resilience, and relentless innovation that shredded their playbook and turned every projection into dust. Still, the Vratha pressed forward. Their empire had not endured through caution. They deployed larger carriers, heavier artillery, more advanced bioforms. They unleashed weapons so devastating that even the bravest among humanity shuddered at the sight of them. Cities burned, landscapes scarred. The night sky glowed with the haunting fire of battles fought miles above the surface. But even as destruction spread, something else took shape within humanity, something the Dominion failed to detect until it had grown too large to contain. It began as whispers among military circles, as strange anomalies in global communication logs, as sudden synchronizations across research facilities that should not have been capable of achieving them. It grew through collaboration across states, branches, companies, and communities. A hidden project, a collective shift, a unifying force. It was not a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was a strategy, a transformation, a recalibration of what it meant for humans to face annihilation. The Dominion's third shock came when they discovered what humans did under near-extinction pressure. They did not splinter, they did not collapse, they did not break into factions as their models predicted. Instead, the species accelerated its innovation faster than any biological civilization the Vratha had ever confronted. Human scientists working in fortified subterranean facilities began decoding Dominion biology, technology, propulsion architecture, and even neural communication networks. They linked data across continents with a level of cooperation no previous era had achieved. Entire fields of science advanced decades within weeks. Humanity's most brilliant minds, engineers, biologists, physicists, mathematicians, survival experts, combined into a single, unstoppable intellectual force. And through this unprecedented unity, humanity reached a revelation that made the Dominion's fate inevitable. The Vratha were not gods. They were not infallible. They were powerful but flawed creatures of pattern, predictability, and doctrine. Their empire thrived on intimidation, their technology on rigid structure, their strategies on historical dominance. They were architects of conquest, not survivors of resistance. But humans were specialists in survival, masters of chaotic adaptation, experts in turning the impossible into the inevitable. As the invasion reached its second week, the Vratha believed they were tightening the noose, but humanity was preparing something far more dangerous than defiance. They were setting the stage for a counterstrike the Dominion could not IM. Agin, a counterstrike born not from desperation, but from a primal truth embedded in every human heart. No matter how overwhelming the threat, humans did not yield. They evolved. And evolution, when fueled by fear and hope in equal measure, became something the Dominion had never faced, a nightmare capable of tearing down even the most ancient empire. Far above Earth, in the quiet cold of space, Dominion commanders reviewed their projections again and again, unable to comprehend why their victory curve had begun to falter. Their enemy should have been crushed by now. Humanity should have folded under the weight of their superior power. Yet instead of retreating into pockets of surrender, humans were coalescing into something far more dangerous than a conventional military force. They were becoming the one thing the Vratha had never encountered in any species. A civilization that fought hardest when it stood on the edge of extinction. Humanity's nightmare was still unfolding. Its darkest hours lay ahead. But in those early days, as the Dominion began to understand the magnitude of the miscalculation they had made, a shift occurred within both conqueror and conquered. For the first time in their long and merciless history, the Vratha felt the faint chill of uncertainty. And for the first time in countless generations, humanity awakened to its true potential. Not as victims, but as the rising storm that would redefine the battlefield of the universe. The invincible had finally found something capable of standing against them. And deep within the heart of a battered but unbroken world, humanity prepared to show the Dominion why they would soon regret ever looking toward Earth. Humanity's first victories were not victories of firepower, but of understanding. As the Dominion escalated its assault, humanity began studying the enemy with the obsessive intensity of a species that had lived its entire existence solving problems it was never meant to survive. Every battlefield, every fallen alien soldier, every fragment of wreckage became data. And data, when fed into the hands of a species defined by relentless curiosity, became something far more dangerous: insight. The first revelation came from battlefield medics who noticed that Dominion warriors, though physically superior to humans, lacked certain responses that humans considered instinctual. They were fast, but their reflexes followed patterns. They were strong, but their movements lacked improvisation. They were lethal, but their lethality depended on predictability. In their thousands of years of conquest, they had never been forced to fight an enemy whose unpredictability was not a flaw, but a defining strength. This realization rippled through American command forces like a spark catching dry grass. Training simulations shifted overnight. Soldiers were instructed not to engage with rigid tactics, but to fight as humans fought best, unexpectedly. They became masters of chaos, turning every engagement into a maelstrom where Dominion pattern recognition fractures began to appear like cracks in the hull of a sinking ship. Across the United States, urban centers transformed into arenas of deliberate disorder. Streets were filled with decoys, false signals, shifting electromagnetic fields, and structures rigged to collapse in carefully designed patterns. Dominion walkers entered these zones expecting straightforward resistance. Instead, they encountered a shifting labyrinth engineered to confuse and dismantle them. Humans guided the chaos with surgical precision, using terrain and technology in ways Dominion strategists were never trained to anticipate. Rural landscapes provided a different yet equally formidable challenge. Vast stretches of American wilderness, mountains, forests, deserts, became natural fortresses. Hunters, wildlife biologists, and locals who understood every contour of their land contributed knowledge that military satellites could never replicate. Dominion troops marching through a seemingly quiet forest found themselves enveloped by acoustic traps that distorted sound and light. Their targeting systems spun in confusion as humans used the terrain's quirks: humidity, temperature gradients, ground vibration, to glitch their sensors into hallucinations of phantom armies. But this growing human ingenuity was only the beginning. Deep beneath hardened research facilities, scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to unlock the true architecture of Dominion technology. What they discovered shook the foundations of human understanding. Dominion vessels did not function like human machines. They were biomechanical hybrids, living constructs shaped by genetic engineering and quantum synthesis. Their hulls pulsed faintly as though breathing. Their cores functioned like neural clusters fused with exotic matter. Their weapon systems grew, adapted, regenerated. To the untrained eye, Dominion technology seemed incomprehensible, but to humanists, wise scientists, individuals who had spent decades wrestling with questions that always stretched beyond the boundaries of known physics, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. And so they solved it. Piece by piece, pattern by pattern, they learned that Dominion technology, while superior, relied on stability. Each component depended on a delicate equilibrium of biological rhythm and quantum resonance. Interrupt that resonance, even slightly, and the technology faltered. Engineers across America began developing localized resonance disruptors, devices not meant to destroy but to destabilize. Field tests produced results that spread hope like wildfire. Dominion drones fell from the sky. Carriers shuddered as their internal systems flickered. Bioweapons suffered spasms that rendered them temporarily inert. For the first time in its millennia-long existence, the Dominion faced an enemy capable of understanding its most sacred constructs. But even as humanity advanced technologically, the emotional core of their resistance, the very soul of their struggle, came from somewhere deeper than science. It came from the stories that spread across the nation like threads stitching together a wounded but unbroken people. Stories of firefighters forming impromptu rescue chains beneath burning ruins to save strangers they would never meet again. Stories of retired veterans walking miles to join defensive lines they were never asked to join. Stories of families who opened their homes to the displaced, creating networks of support that defied every Dominion expectation about human selfishness. Stories of scientists who worked until their hands shook and their eyes blurred, refusing rest because the world needed one more breakthrough, one more idea, one more chance. The Dominion viewed these acts with confusion. They could not comprehend why humans risked themselves for others with no strategic value. They could not understand why fear did not fracture humanity, but strengthened its bond. In the Dominion's worldview, individuals existed for the sake of the empire. But humanity, fractured, imperfect, chaotic humanity, proved that its greatest weapon was neither strength nor technology, but connection. And connection fueled their next evolution. As the invasion deepened into its third week, a unified human framework emerged, something unprecedented in Earth's history. Nations that once struggled to agree on anything now shared intelligence, strategies, and resources with astonishing efficiency. Devastated cities became hubs of cooperation rather than collapse. Survivors became contributors. Local leaders coordinated with federal agencies in seamless networks. And the entire species began behaving as though guided by a singular drive: survival through unity. The Dominion took notice. Their analysts flagged humanity's behavioral shift as an anomaly. Their commanders questioned why a species with no hive mind suddenly moved with hive-like coordination. Their leaders reviewed centuries of conquest logs, searching for a precedent. There was none. What they faced on Earth was not the humanity of old. It was a new humanity, a humanity forged by pressure, welded by loss, sharpened by purpose. Still, the Dominion remained confident. They had conquered species that burned brighter than humanity. They had overpowered civilizations that possessed strength humans could only dream of. Even with humanity's unprecedented evolution, the Dominion's armada outnumbered Earth's combined forces thousands to one. Their firepower could reshape continents. Their soldiers were engineered for war from birth. Their empire spanned millions of worlds. Humanity was merely prolonging the inevitable. Or so they believed. But the Dominion could not perceive the quiet tremor shaking the foundations of their conquest. They did not understand the nature of a species that learned by failing, adapted by necessity, and innovated from desperation. They did not realize that every hour humanity survived increased the likelihood of a breakthrough that would rewrite the battlefield. And that breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Earth's electromagnetic environment. Satellite engineers discovered that Earth's naturally fluctuating electromagnetic field, combined with artificially generated pulses from human devices, created interference patterns capable of overwhelming Dominion neural link networks. Dominion command nodes experienced momentary lapses, glitches where units hesitated, commands lagged, and formation coherence broke. Though brief, these lapses revealed a weakness nearly catastrophic in implication. The Dominion depended on perfect synchronization. Break that, and their entire war machine unraveled. Human strategists did not hesitate. They began designing pulse generators capable of amplifying this natural interference, weaponizing Earth's magnetic anomalies. These devices were deployed across key areas, hidden beneath mountains, within cities, across plains, and even disguised among ordinary infrastructure. When activated, they created distortion zones where Dominion communication faltered, coordination collapsed, and elite troops became isolated pockets of vulnerability. The Dominion noticed these disruptions but could not trace their origin. Their technology, so advanced that it bordered on the divine in the eyes of lesser species, was being undone by a phenomenon as deceptively simple as electromagnetic interference, something they had never needed to account for on any other world they had conquered. Their predictability became their downfall. Humanity's unpredictability became its blade. Yet even as victories mounted, humanity carried its wounds. Cities lay in ruins, millions were displaced. Entire landscapes bore scars that would last generations. But these wounds did not weaken humanity, they hardened its resolve. The Dominion's relentless assault continued, now tinged with frustration. They deployed new bioforms, towering constructs optimized for Earth's gravity. They altered atmospheric disruptors to counter electromagnetic interference. They adapted, but only within the rigid boundaries of their doctrine. Humanity, however, evolved without boundaries. The United States became a crucible of experimentation. University labs collaborated with energy grids. Aerospace engineers worked alongside wildlife experts. Quantum physicists teamed with machinists and field mechanics. And through this unprecedented fusion of disciplines, humanity reached its next terrifying leap. They began reverse engineering not just Dominion machines, but Dominion biology. Scientists discovered that the Vratha possessed neural structures highly sensitive to emotional feedback and environmental stimulus, a designed trait useful for coordination, devastating when overloaded. Humans, with their chaotic emotional expressions and irregular patterns, inadvertently created cognitive noise that destabilized Dominion morale more than any physical weapon. Humanity realized something extraordinary. They did not merely frighten the Dominion with weapons. They frightened them by existing. For humans embodied a principle the Dominion had long since forgotten, that intelligence was not about predictability, but about possibility. That progress did not come from control, but from curiosity. That survival did not require perfection, only the refusal to surrender. And now, at the turning point of the invasion, as Dominion fleets darkened the sky in preparation for the final push, humanity unveiled the culmination of weeks of frantic research, a system designed not to fight the Dominion, but to collapse their invasion from within. A system built from Earth's electromagnetic signature, from Dominion resonance weaknesses, from human unpredictability, and from a planet's united will to survive. Its testing would begin soon. But before that moment arrived, a quiet transformation swept across humanity. Fear had not vanished, but hardened into resolve. Loss had not broken them, but bonded them. And the Dominion, with all their power, had not conquered Earth, they had awakened it. The invaders, who believed themselves unstoppable, had unknowingly sparked the rebirth of a species capable of becoming their undoing. And somewhere deep within human command networks, a single truth crystallized, undeniable and absolute. The Dominion did not face the humanity of yesterday. They faced what humanity became when pushed to the edge. And what humanity became was something the universe had never seen before. A species that refused to die, refused to bow, and refused to let the stars belong to tyrants. The storm was gathering. The turning tide was coming. And the Dominion's final nightmare was preparing to open its eyes. Humanity's turning point did not erupt from the battlefield, nor from the smoldering ruins of devastated cities, nor even from the collective anger of a wounded world. Instead, it emerged from silence, quiet, focused, breath-held determination in the hidden corners of fortified labs, bunkers, and improvised research hubs scattered across the United States. The greatest act of human defiance began not with explosions, but with thought. In those weeks when the Dominion tightened its chokehold around Earth, humanity's finest minds undertook a race that had no precedent. They sought to create something that should not have been possible, something that rewrote the rules both sides assumed were unbreakable. The Dominion believed themselves untouchable because they built their empire on stability. Humanity, long accustomed to living on the edge of chaos, crafted strength by embracing instability. And from this crucible of desperation and innovation, the impossible weapon began to take shape. Its foundation was deceptively simple, a harmonic disruption array, originally conceived as a scaled-up version of the electromagnetic interference devices that had destabilized Dominion TR. Oops, but where early prototypes created localized effects, the new design sought something far more ambitious, a planetary lattice, a global web of synchronized emitters capable of distorting not just Dominion communication, but Dominion biology, Dominion technology, and Dominion thought patterns across an entire hemisphere. It was a weapon the Dominion could not have anticipated because they believed no species could progress this quickly. No civilization could jump decades of scientific advancement in mere weeks. But humanity, when forced into a corner, did not progress linearly. They leapt. The United States became the center of this effort not because it held the most advanced labs, nor the strongest military force, but because it embodied humanity's defining contradiction: fierce individuality blended with unyielding unity under crisis. State lines, political divides, institutional rivalries, all dissolved in the face of the existential threat looming from the sky. Laboratories in Boston and Seattle collaborated seamlessly with engineers in Houston, physicists in Los Alamos, coders in Silicon Valley, and machinists in the Midwest. Military bases provided power, protection, and logistics. Civilian networks provided manpower, creativity, and specialization from every imaginable field. And under this unprecedented unity, the weapon grew more complex than any single mind could comprehend. It became a tapestry of ideas layered atop one another: quantum resonance cascading through bioadaptive signal modulation, amplified by Earth's natural electromagnetic shell, shaped by algorithms designed to exploit Dominion neural vulnerabilities. Every component was refined by a different team, in a different region, with a different set of skills, all working toward a single goal: survival. Yet the deeper the research teams delved, the more they uncovered a truth that chilled even the most veteran strategists. The Dominion were not merely advanced, they were ancient. Their empire spanned millions of years. Their technology was built atop strata of knowledge accumulated from countless conquered civilizations. The gaps humans bridged in weeks had taken the Dominion centuries. For humanity to catch up so quickly was not simply impressive, it was unnatural. And so a question began to form in the minds of Earth's researchers. Whispered in hushed tones, they refused to document. Had humanity always possessed this potential? Or had the Dominion awakened something dormant, something even humans did not fully understand? The answer would come later. For now, humanity channeled its emerging potential into the weapon that would decide their fate. The Dominion, oblivious to the magnitude of the threat forming beneath the surface, escalated their efforts. Their fleets grew thicker in Earth's orbit, blotting out constellations. Their atmospheric disruptors intensified, destabilizing weather systems and turning skies into turbulent battlegrounds. Their bioforms increased in size and ferocity, tearing through defensive lines with brutal precision. Yet everywhere they advanced, they noticed the same unsettling phenomenon: humans did not break. Even when cities fell, resistance continued. Even when communities were displaced, survivors regrouped. Even when Dominion superiority was overwhelming, humans adapted, faster, sharper, more strategically than the Dominion's models predicted. The invaders grew uneasy, sensing a pattern they could not decipher. Their victories felt hollow, their progress slow. Every step forward came with a cost that grew heavier with each passing day. And then the anomalies began. Dominion soldiers reported sudden waves of disorientation, brief, fleeting episodes of cognitive distortion where human movements appeared erratic, impossible to track. Elite units hesitated at crucial moments, unable to synchronize as seamlessly as before. Ground commanders felt an unfamiliar sensation rippling through their neural systems, a kind of emotional static generated not by external weapons, but by the mere presence of human resistance. The Dominion, for the first time in their long history, felt something akin to dread. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the core of humanity's weapon reached completion. It was not beautiful. It was not sleek. It did not possess the elegant symmetry of Dominion constructs. Instead, it resembled a tangled heart of machinery, ruthless, raw, asymmetrical, and powerful. A living testament to humanity's greatest strength, the ability to take broken pieces and assemble them into something greater than the sum of their parts. The central array pulsed with low frequencies that vibrated through the reinforced bunker walls like the heartbeat of a giant awakening. Engineers monitored fluctuating waves of exotic energies humanity had never touched before the invasion. Physicists mapped resonance patterns that rippled across digital screens like seismic tremors. Biologists analyzed Dominion neural sequences to ensure the weapon targeted only invaders and not the humans fighting them. Each team felt the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. They understood that the Dominion represented one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and that this weapon, if successful, would do more than repel an invasion. It would announce humanity's arrival onto the interstellar stage with a thunderclap capable of shaking the foundations of empires. But the weapon required one final component, a component no technology could provide. It needed synchronization with Earth's electromagnetic field, which fluctuated based on solar activity, atmospheric conditions, and tectonic resonance. The array required perfect alignment with these natural factors, all at the precise moment when Dominion forces concentrated their largest fleets above North America for a decisive strike. Humanity had to wait. Watch. Time the impossible. The Dominion unknowingly played their role perfectly. As their failures mounted, Dominion leadership, accustomed to swift domination, shifted strategies. No longer were they focused on subduing the planet. They sought annihilation, a single overwhelming attack that would extinguish humanity before its resilience became a contagion capable of spreading throughout the galaxy. They prepared the Convergence Offensive, the largest fleet ever assembled for a single planetary strike, descended toward Earth, surrounding the planet in a ring of metallic dread. Their supercarriers' gravitational engines distorted entire weather systems. Their coordinated bioforms amassed in swarms large enough to darken the sky. Their planet-breaker weapon cores began charging, creating vibrations felt across continents. It was the moment humanity had feared since the invasion began, and the moment they had prepared for. United States command networks activated every satellite relay, every subterranean generator, every mobile emitter, every resonance anchor hidden within the country's infrastructure. The weapon, dormant until now, began its activation sequence. Across the nation, lights flickered, machines hummed with rising pitch, power grids pulsed with unnatural energy. Scientists watched synchronization data streaming across screens with breathless anticipation. But then, humanity learned the true cost of wielding the impossible. The weapon demanded more power than Earth's grids could sustain. Even with every generator running at maximum output, even with every fusion reactor pushed beyond its safety limits, the energy requirement soared higher than calculations predicted. Humanity stood on the brink of its final chance, its only chance, and found itself unable to finish what it had started. In that instant, humanity faced its defining moment. Communities across the United States began shutting down all non-essential systems, voluntarily plunging themselves into darkness. Cities dimmed, towns fell silent, factories powered down. Every watt of electricity they could spare surged into the network feeding the weapon. Hospitals ran on emergency batteries. Municipal systems paused. Entire regions of the country contributed the energy of millions of homes, businesses, and machines, sacrificing comfort, safety, and normalcy for the survival of their species. And still, the weapon demanded more. So humanity gave more. Rural wind farms redirected their output. Solar fields diverted their energy. Universities wired experimental reactors into the grid. Naval ships stationed offshore channeled power through relay buoys into coastal networks. Decommissioned infrastructure was resurrected to carry the load. Then, in one final act of unity, the nation's largest energy reserves, strategic, protected, never meant to be depleted, were released into the system. The weapon roared to life. Its activation sent a pulse through the Earth's crust that resonated like the mouth of the planet opening in defiance. The skies above the Rockies shimmered as raw, invisible force spiraled upward, threading into a lattice that wrapped itself around the globe. Dominion sensors detected the anomaly too late. Their networks flickered, their commanders faltered, their soldiers staggered as waves of harmonic disruption tore through their neural systems. Their fleets drifted out of formation, colliding with one another as synchronization collapsed. And then the pulse struck. It was not a laser, not a missile, not any weapon the Dominion had ever encountered. It was a global shockwave of destabilization, targeted, precise, devastating. Dominion ships convulsed as their biological circuitry ruptured. Bioforms screamed in frequencies that echoed across battle-scorched plains. Planet-breaker cores shattered into cascading implosions that burned out across the vacuum of space. Above Earth, the greatest armada in the galaxy began to die. Below Earth, humanity finally glimpsed hope, not as a distant dream, but as a rising reality. Yet they also realized something terrifying. The weapon had worked too well. It had awakened something vast, ancient, and buried deep within humanity's potential. Something the Dominion had unintentionally unleashed. And this awakening was only the beginning. Humanity's nightmare had ended. But the Dominions had just begun. The destruction of the Dominion's convergence offensive was not merely a battlefield victory, it was a fracture in the psychological armor of an empire that had never known fear. The shockwave of humanity's impossible weapon rippled through the void, reaching command nodes across the Dominion's sprawling front lines. It carried no physical damage, yet it delivered something far more corrosive: the revelation that their ancient certainty of dominance had been shattered by a species barely crawling into the cosmic arena. For the first time in its long, crushing history, the Dominion faltered. Across their damaged fleets, neural cluster cores flickered as the biomechanical minds that guided each vessel attempted to reconcile the impossible. Their logic trees fractured. Their synchronization webs sputtered. The Dominion found themselves unable to comprehend how a world they had expected to conquer in days had developed technology capable of severing their very identity as an interlinked, harmonious war machine. While Dominion ships spiraled in disarray above Earth, humanity, watching from the battered ground below, felt a surge of triumph tempered by something heavier, deeper, and more troubling. They had survived the onslaught. They had unleashed a force that humbled the most feared empire known to the stars. But the cost of victory weighed upon their shoulders like a storm cloud that would never fully dissipate. Cities lay broken. Families mourned immeasurable losses. Millions were displaced across continents scarred by orbital bombardment, collapsing infrastructures, and landscapes reshaped by alien weaponry. The United States, the heart of humanity's resistance, bore deep wounds. Yet from these wounds rose a defiant, unbroken spirit that spread across the globe like a wildfire of resilience. Survival had united humanity. Victory had changed it. Something awakened within the human species, not in any one individual, but throughout their collective consciousness. A subtle but undeniable shift. It emerged in the way scientists communicated with instincts that bordered on intuitive leaps. It showed in how soldiers reacted with reflexes far sharper than their training allowed. It lived in the synchronization of countless minds aligned under one shared purpose: to ensure the Dominion would never return. Humanity had brushed against a frontier of evolution triggered by the pressure of extinction. In turning back the Dominion, they had stepped across a threshold they did not fully understand. Yet the Dominion understood it far too late. Above the Earth, the remaining operational elements of the shattered invasion fleet drifted like wounded leviathans bleeding energy into the void. Some attempted retreat, but found their navigation cores scrambled, their fleet AI desynchronized, and their propulsion limbs spasming from harmonic destabilization. Other vessels simply hung motionless, paralyzed in a kind of technological seizure triggered by humanity's weapon. Inside those ships, the surviving Vratha warriors, for the first time in their cold, calculating existence, felt isolation. Their neural links, meant to bind them into perfect unity, now carried only static. Their sense of collective identity had disintegrated into fragments. They were alone, an experience alien to their engineered biology. Below them, humanity watched, not with cruelty, but with a grim understanding that this moment marked a turning point not only in the war, but in their place in the universe. The world had changed, humanity had changed, and the Dominion, still reeling, had yet to grasp the magnitude of their mistake. Across the United States, research facilities continued analyzing the data produced by the weapon's activation. What they discovered raised both awe and alarm. The harmonic disruption had not merely destabilized Dominion systems, it had revealed something hidden within the frequencies of Earth's electromagnetic field. Something that answered. Sensors detected resonances that did not originate from human-made devices or natural environmental fluctuations. These signals pulsed like echoes, structured, layered, almost communicative, as if humanity's impossible weapon had awakened an ancient symphony woven into the fabric of the planet itself. Some scientists suggested these patterns hinted at a dormant potential within human biology, an evolutionary pathway activated by extreme stress. Others hypothesized that Earth, shaped by billions of years of cosmic radiation, solar storms, and tectonic shifts, possessed unique electromagnetic properties that amplified cognitive and biological results. Whatever the truth, one fact became impossible to ignore. Humanity was becoming something more. Meanwhile, the Dominion's remaining commanders regained partial control of their scattered forces. Across disrupted neural networks, they sent fractured but urgent directives to regroup. Their empire had never faced resistance that jeopardized the integrity of the Dominion collective itself. This was no longer a battle for conquest, it was a battle for survival. Their war doctrine, unchanged for millennia, demanded retaliation. But their instincts whispered something unfamiliar and paralyzing: caution. Humanity monitored their movements with satellites hastily repaired and reoriented to track the drifting remnants. Across command bunkers beneath Colorado, Virginia, California, and other strategic regions, analysts watched as Dominion vessels gathered into randomized formations, disorganized, jittery, fearful. Yes, the Dominion were afraid. Humanity, scarred yet standing, prepared for the next phase. But the Dominion's next move defied expectations. Instead of launching a counteroffensive, the invaders attempted to flee. Their destabilized fleets turned away from Earth, propulsion systems coughing unstable bursts of energy as they struggled to retreat to the safety of deep space. Their transmissions grew erratic, fragments of distress, confusion, and fragmented coordination rippling across broken networks. The conquerors who once marched across the stars with the confidence of inevitability now scrambled to escape the world they had once expected to burn. Humanity watched their retreat but did not celebrate, for they understood the greater danger. A wounded empire would return, and next time they would come with the full might of a civilization spanning millions of systems. Earth had won a battle, but the war had only entered a new, more terrifying stage. And humanity was left with a monumental realization. Their impossible weapon had been built for defense, but now it had to become something more. Earth needed to prepare not for survival, but for deterrence. The Dominion, shattered and humiliated, would not accept defeat. They would come back, and when they did, humanity could no longer afford to meet them as the species they once were. Thus began humanity's acceleration. Across the United States, labs that had once built prototypes at desperate speeds now operated with refined purpose. They reverse-engineered Dominion materials, studying molecular architectures that blended organic tissue with quantum-stabilized metals. Engineers repurposed alien alloys into human-designed frameworks, creating hybrid machinery unlike anything Earth had ever produced. Scientists mapped the neural resonance of the Vratha collective, identifying frequency bands capable of destabilizing not just communication, but the very cohesion of their shared consciousness. This knowledge became the heart of humanity's next breakthrough, technology designed to fracture Dominion unity on a galactic scale. Military strategists studied Dominion battle doctrine, identifying blind spots and rigid dependencies. They developed asymmetric counter-tactics tailored to exploit those weaknesses. Training simulations now incorporated hybrid gravity environments, bioadaptive threats, and resonance-based anomalies inspired by Dominion weapons. Humanity wasn't rebuilding. They were transforming. Even the people themselves changed. Stress-mapped psychological analyses revealed rising levels of cognitive sharpening across survivors, heightened pattern recognition, faster reflex integration, increased collaborative decision-making. Communities operated with the kind of cohesion that once only emerged during natural disasters or wartime, except now it became the normal state of society. The Dominion had forced humanity into metamorphosis, but they had also made a second, catastrophic mistake. By invading Earth, they had directed the attention of the universe's most resilient, adaptive, and relentless species toward the stars. Now humanity began to look outward, and for the first time they did so with intention. Still, amid humanity's rise, a lingering fear echoed through research circles. The vast resonances awakened during the weapon's activation continued to pulse beneath the Earth's surface and throughout its magnetic field, as if answering a call no one had consciously made. Some scientists worried the awakening was not a side effect of the weapon. Some feared it was something older, something dormant, something waiting. But the truth of that would come later. For now, humanity focused on preparing for what everyone knew was coming, the Dominion's retaliation. Yet the Dominion themselves faced an internal crisis far greater than humanity realized. For the first time, they understood that their ancient strategy, conquer swiftly, overwhelm psychologically, dominate absolutely, had failed catastrophically. Humanity had not only survived, they had forced the Dominion into open panic. Across the Dominion's vast territory, distress signals spread like fractures in glass. Their rulers felt a ripple of existential dread through the collective. And then they felt something worse. A message, unintended, unwelcomed, and impossible. A fragment of resonance carried along the same frequencies their neural networks used for interspecies coordination. A pulse unlike any signal they had ever encountered. Humanity's weapon had done more than destabilize their systems. It had imprinted humanity's presence onto the Dominion's vast mindscape. Across the galaxy, millions of Vratha felt the same terrifying echo. Not human words, not human thoughts, but the unmistakable impression of human defiance. A species that refused conquest. A species that survived annihilation. A species that rose stronger under pressure. A species that learned too quickly. A species that adapted too easily. A species that would never again be underestimated. In their shared consciousness, the Dominion felt something that shattered the foundation of their worldview. They felt humanity looking back at them. Suddenly, the invaders realized the truth. The moment they attacked Earth, they created their final nightmare. And humanity, scarred, awakened, evolving, prepared to step into the role the Dominion had forced upon them. Not prey, not survivors, not even defenders, but the rising power the Dominion feared the most. A force capable of reaching them. And reaching them was exactly what humanity intended to do next. Humanity's transformation after the Dominion's failed conquest was not marked by a single moment, nor by any declaration, parade, or shifting of flags. It happened in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. An awakening spread across a species that had survived the unimaginable and emerged with its identity reforged. Their world lay broken in many places, but their spirit stood taller than it ever had. What was once a fractured civilization held together by tenuous alliances had become something unified, purposeful, and aware of its own terrifying potential. For the Dominion, observing from afar as they retreated into the deeper arms of the galaxy, the horror did not come from Earth's weapon, nor from their crippled fleets left drifting around a planet they once believed trivial. Their terror came from what they sensed through the residual neural resonance the weapon had imprinted upon them. They felt humanity's evolution. They felt the sharpening of a species that once fumbled through its infancy, now stepping into a dawn it had been unknowingly preparing for across all of its bloody, resilient history. The Dominion, once the hunters of worlds, felt the unmistakable sensation of becoming prey. And humanity, for the first time, sensed something out in the cosmic dark, the Dominion's fear. It pulsed faintly within the echoes left behind by the weapon's activation, carried unintentionally through the resonance web humanity had learned to manipulate. It was not a communication in the traditional sense, but an imprint, an emotional fingerprint revealing the state of an empire that had never before known the weight of vulnerability. Humanity's scientists analyzed the lingering pulse patterns with a reverence that bordered on awe. They discovered that the Dominion's vast neural lattice, the backbone of their collective military and cultural identity, had been fractured, not simply disrupted, but forced into a state of introspection the collective had never experienced. A species designed to move as one mind now struggled with the dissonance of scattered, conflicting emotions. And humanity had caused it. But Earth was not content to simply defend. It was not enough to survive. They knew a wounded empire spanning millions of systems would not accept humiliation. They knew an enemy so ancient would return with a vengeance the moment its wounds healed. And so humanity faced a choice, one that echoed across command networks, research labs, military bases, and the hearts of billions. Wait for the Dominion to strike again, or take control of their newfound destiny. The decision emerged not from fear, but from a recognition of responsibility, responsibility to every life lost, every city burned, every family displaced. Humanity would not wait for another armada to darken the skies. The day the Dominion attacked Earth, they opened a door that could never again be closed. Humanity, once bound to a single world, prepared to step into the cosmos with the resolve of a species forged by struggle. The first phase of Earth's response began with reconstruction, but not the reconstruction of the old world. This was the creation of something entirely new. Infrastructure was redesigned with hybrid technologies gleaned from Dominion wreckage. Energy grids incorporated resonance stabilizers capable of powering devices well beyond anything humanity had previously engineered. Transportation shifted from combustion and chemical propulsion to fields of directed resonance, enabling vehicles to hover, accelerate, and maneuver with unimaginable efficiency. And perhaps the most revolutionary change came in communication. Humanity discovered how to project encoded resonance signals through Earth's magnetic field, creating a planetary network that synchronized minds, not in a hive, but in a lattice of shared intuition. It did not invade individuality. Instead, it refined cooperation. People found themselves understanding each other's intentions more quickly, collaborating with unprecedented clarity, and solving problems with a unity that felt almost instinctual. Humanity had not become a collective. They had become connected. This connection spread across nations, cultures, and continents, forming a global consciousness built from trust, empathy, and the hardened lessons of near extinction. The United States, still bearing the scars of the invasion, became the central hub of this transformation, not through dominance, but through the role it had played in developing the impossible weapon and coordinating humanity's first unified resistance. Then came the second phase, preparation for the stars. Earth's orbit, once a pristine blue cradle, became a hive of activity. Massive shipyards grew from skeletal frameworks into towering structures that encircled the planet like a new constellation. These were not Dominion ships. These were not human ships. They were something new, hybrid vessels born from the collision of two civilizations, shaped by necessity, powered by resonance cores capable of manipulating both space and energy in ways humanity had only dreamed of months before. These vessels held within them the promise and the threat of humanity's next steps. Domestically, doubts existed. Some feared humanity was becoming the very thing it had fought against, a force capable of conquest and destruction. Others believed humanity had a duty to reach beyond Earth, not for dominance, but for assurance that no species would ever again attempt what the Dominion had done. But every debate converged upon one irrefutable truth. Humanity had been thrust into the cosmic arena without warning. Now they had to stand on their own terms. The third phase began with a revelation. Dominion distress signals, faint and unstable, traveled across space like the dying breaths of a wounded beast. These signals carried fragments of locations, coordinates of worlds at the edge of Dominion territory, where fear, chaos, and fragmentation spread like rot. Humanity studied these signals in silence. They realized something staggering. The Dominion were not regrouping. They were collapsing. Their timelines were accelerating in unpredictable ways. Factions emerged within what was once a perfectly synchronized empire. Some fleets sought to rejoin the collective. Others wandered aimlessly, unable to regain unity. Still others appeared to be in conflict, an unthinkable fracture in a species built to avoid internal strife at any cost. Humanity had not simply defeated the Dominion's invasion. They had unintentionally destabilized the Dominion itself. Yet the collapse of an empire spanning thousands of galaxies created a new, terrifying vacuum. Power struggles erupted across regions humanity had never known existed. Species previously enslaved or subjugated sensed opportunity and rose in rebellion. Ancient rivalries reignited. Dangerous technologies, once tightly guarded by Dominion oversight, fell into desperate hands. The galaxy trembled under the weight of upheaval. And all of it began with Earth's. Humanity now faced a responsibility far greater than survival. They had altered the balance of the universe and could not retreat into isolation. The first fleet humanity constructed, 5 vessels forged with hybrid technology rose from orbit like leviathans ascending into the dawn. They were not vessels of conquest. They were shields, sentinels, messengers bearing a new mandate. Humanity would not be hunted again. Humanity would not allow tyranny to endure unchallenged. Humanity would not step into the stars as victims, but as guardians of their own destiny. As the fleet prepared for departure, a wave of resonance swept across the planet, not from machines, but from humanity itself. It was not telepathy nor a hive mind, but a surge of collective certainty. Billions felt the same heartbeat, the same breath, the same understanding. They were no longer the species the Dominion had thought them to be. They were something far more resilient, something far more dangerous, something far more alive. When the First Fleet ignited its resonance cores and leapt into the void, the stars themselves seemed to bend around them. Space folded, light warped, and humanity, for the first time in its long, chaotic history, left its cradle with purpose. Far across the galaxy, in the ruins of a once mighty Dominion command world, surviving VR, Other leaders felt the ripple of humanity's departure through the fractured neural resonance that still connected them. It struck them with the force of revelation. Humanity was not chasing them in vengeance. Humanity was not seeking conquest. Humanity was rising. And the Vratha understood then what their own ancestors had forgotten long ago. Empires fall, conquerors fade, but a species forged by adversity, a species born of struggle, a species shaped by the chaos of its own world, is a force that cannot be stopped. Humanity had become the Dominion's final nightmare, not because of their weapon, their technology, or their resilience, but because they represented something the Dominion could never defeat. Possibility. The possibility of growth. The possibility of adaptation. The possibility of breaking every limit imposed upon them. The possibility that no power in the universe, no matter how ancient, could prevent a determined species from rising. As humanity's fleet journeyed toward the stars, the galaxy watched, some with hope, some with fear, some with curiosity. Earth, once insignificant, once overlooked, now stood poised to reshape the cosmic story. The Dominion had conquered countless worlds. Across millennia, they had extinguished civilizations, crushed resistance, and reigned without challenge. But in the end, it was humanity, imperfect, stubborn, unpredictable humanity, that became the storm they could never outrun. Humanity had risen. Humanity had awakened. Humanity had stepped beyond the horizon of its own limitations. And the universe would never be the same.